Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the fit for this video is Daredevil. Let's take a look at a video.
Can anyone explain to me why these Bible verses are not in the Bible? So I'm going to read the verses. Can someone explain to me why these verses are missing, please? Matthew 17:21, Matthew 18:11, Matthew 23:14, Mark 7:16, Mark 11:26, Mark 15:28, Luke 17:36, Romans 16:24, and John 5:4.
Hey, happy to help. These passages are omitted from most newer editions of the New Testament because we know that they were not written by the authors of the New Testament. They are verses that have been added in by scribes and editors in later manuscripts. And we know this because over the last several centuries, we've discovered hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts of the Greek New Testament that go all the way back to the 2nd century CE, shortly after these texts were actually written. And we can show the change in these manuscripts over time. We can also account for how things tend to drop out as manuscripts are copied and transmitted, and how things tend to be added in as manuscripts are copied and transmitted. And in the case of these verses, we know for sure that these are things that were added in. And sometimes it's because we can show the process of their addition to the manuscript. So for instance, Matthew 17:21, this kind doesn't come out except by much fasting and prayer. That's not in our earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of Matthew. So for instance, in this manuscript, it doesn't say any such thing. It just goes straight from what we now label verse 20 to what we now label verse 22. And then we have this manuscript here, Sinaiticus, which has someone in a later scribal hand writing a version of a passage from Mark 9 into the margin of the Gospel of Matthew, and then using little symbols to indicate this is where this should go. And then in later manuscripts, that gets worked into the body of the text. Now, based on our observations regarding how texts tend to change as scribes copy them and as they're transmitted, there's no good way to account for how this passage could have fallen out. So some people will say, well, maybe it was original, but then it fell out, and so we have a manuscript that doesn't have it, and then they're correcting it by adding it back in. That's not supported by any data. There's no reason that it would have fallen out. There's a reason that it would have been added in, and the reason is to harmonize the two tellings of the same story between Matthew and Mark. But we can't account for how it could have fallen out originally, and so this is something that has been added in by a later scribe. So by removing it, we're producing a version of the New Testament that is closer to how it would have come off of the pen of the original authors, rather than something that has been altered and changed by later scribes and editors. So editions of the New Testament that omit these passages are closer to what the original authors of these books actually wrote.